This is my May reading wrap up. Hi, I'm Hannah, welcome to my channel, and today I'm going to be going through the books I've read in May and what I rated them. So let's dive in. And first up, we've got Better Than the Movies by Lynn. So with this book, I'd seen quite a few posts on Book Talk about it, and I didn't really know what it was about. I'd just seen a few quotes, things like that, or I'd seen it in people's reading wrap-ups, and I added it to my basket and thought, I'm just going to give it a go. I bought this book and the sequel, and I decided just to dive on in. I had zero expectations, and I found out then that it was a YA romance book, and as I was reading it, I could tell it was definitely in the rom-com style. It really did remind me of sort of like a Bridget Jones 10 Things I Hate About You sort of vibe. It's got like childhood enemies to lovers, prom scenes, it's got fake dating in there, and at the start of every single chapter is a quote from a rom-com movie, and I loved that. I thought that was so creative, and for each chapter I was like really excited to sort of see which movie it was going to come from and what quote it would be. My favourite movie of all time is 500 Days of Summer. I'm absolutely obsessed with it. I think it's an incredible movie, and it's also one of those movies that not everybody has watched, because there's so many times when friends say to me, what's your favourite movie? And I go, 500 Days. Some people go, what? And I'm like, but I love that movie so much. So if you haven't seen it, I recommend it, and please watch it and let me know what you think. But when I was reading this book, there's actually a quote from 500 Days of Summer as one of the chapter starts. So I was absolutely fangirl, and it was chapter 5 as well, so it was quite early on, and that had me hooked from that point, because I just, chef's kiss, that film is brilliant. I do think that it was a little bit slow for starting off. I think it did take me a while to get into it. I think because of the Book Talk hype, I stuck with it longer than I normally would have, because I thought if everybody's talking about it, there's got to be a reason for it. So I did stick with, and I started to understand the hype. There were some moments in it that actually really did make me sort of like have a little bit of like a giggle. I found it really interesting about the main characters. So she's really obsessed with like romance. She loves romance movies. She loves like music and movie soundtracks. I hadn't really read a character like her before, and you could really sort of like envision her aesthetically. So that was really good about the book as well. And in terms of like Wes Bennett, I feel like at the start of it, I thought, oh, I'm already starting to like him, and then by the end, oh, he fully had my heart. I like a book where there's romance involved, but I really do like a little bit of drama in there, something a little bit dramatic happening. And you know, as lovely as this book was, I do think for me I just sort of missed that like climactic ending. But I understand that that's not the genre of this book. This is very much supposed to be a YA rom-com, and it's not meant to be anything crazy. So if you haven't read Better Than the Movies and you're just looking for a nice, fun, casual read, I recommend this book. Next up is Nothing Like the Movies. So I read this immediately after Better Than the Movies, and I gave it 3.8 stars. It's simply because in the first book, the main character Liz, as I mentioned before, is very much, she loves romance movies. She's very romantic in the way that she thinks. She's got her own style of clothes. She has quite a bold aesthetic, and it's very much her character is consumed by the idea of romance, and is, you know, romanticizing like life. So this book sort of ends with her realizing that, you know, she can be herself. She doesn't need to be anybody else. She doesn't need to dress in a different way, you know, to sort of like, you know, for somebody to like love her. She's got her own individuality, and that's beautiful. And in this book, I sort of felt like we'd taken 10 steps back. So in this book, it was great to sort of see like Liz and Wes again, but Liz is very different in this book. Like, you wouldn't believe it's the same character. She's sort of like, she's given up on love. She isn't really like going around quoting movies as much anymore. And for some reason, there was quite a bit of like a shift in her character. So in the first book, she's trying to pursue like a career within music, and she loves making movie soundtracks. And in the next book, you know, when she's actually at university, you're thinking, okay, we're going to see a bit more about her with her music. And as much as she will be pursuing that in the long term, you don't really see that in you don't really see that in this book. So in this book, she's started to have a bit more of an appreciation and a love for photography. She's doing that a lot more, but she also works within like sports photography, which is such a pivot from her in the first book. So in the first book, there's even a reference at some point about her with sport, and she's basically saying like she just doesn't have a clue and she doesn't have an interest. And I know that the reason for doing this creatively was to have a reason for the two characters to be seeing each other much more frequently. But I think it'd have been really good to see her love of music be in this book a lot more. Her style in this book is also different. So she doesn't really wear the dresses and the skirts that she's so in love with in the first book. She's definitely dressing a bit more mainstream in this book. And I think that's what made the book lose a couple points for me, just because I love a character that loves who they are. I love a character that's different, that doesn't follow the herd. And I feel like it went from her being that in the first book, and I feel like in the second book, the things that made Liz her own person were a little bit lost in that. It was also the repetition of the fake dating trope, and I understand that that's like sort of like part of this universe, but I think seeing that in the first book, it would have been great to see a different trope in the second book. So I did enjoy this book, but it was just so different from the first one. I think that that's why it lost those few points for me. It's definitely an enjoyable read. It's definitely a great follow-on, but it sort of feels like, you know, who Liz and Wes were in the first one are sort of left behind for the new Liz and Wes, if that makes any sense. In the first book, we definitely see Liz have a few embarrassing moments, and they are really funny. And in this book, it's sort of Wes's turn to have those embarrassing moments. So that was another great thing about the book. It was sort of having the sort of balance of the two. If you do really like happy endings, you will be happy reading these books. And I think if you're looking for a YA, rom-com, easy read, you will be really happy with this series. So the next book I read in the month was Say You Swear by Meagan Brandy, and I was obsessed. I rated this book 5 stars. Essentially, I was a big fan of the Boys of Tommen series, and I've been thinking about that sort of like non-stop for the past few months, and I think I was just trying to find a book with similar sort of vibes, similar tropes. So I was trying to find books with similar sort of themes, so sports romance or found family, and I came across recommendations for the book Say You Swear. And this was set in America. It's about a group of friends, and the boys in the group, they play American football, and it's about them going to the same university, you know, staying friends, and sort of the dynamic of that group. And it centers around Ariana Johnson. It's about her on her journey to finding love. So there are some similarities between this book and Boys of Tommen in terms of found family, sports romance, centered around school. What's actually pretty crazy is that the love interest in this book and the love interest in Binding 13 meet in a pretty similar way, in the sense that in Binding 13, Johnny Kavanagh kicks a rugby ball and it accidentally hits the lead female character, Shannon, in the head. And that's how those two meet. In this book, Ari is sat at the beach and she gets hit in the head with an American football, and it's essentially, that's how she meets the lead male character, Noah, because he essentially missed the pass and it hit her, and that's how they meet. So if you really love the Boys of Tommen series and you're kind of missing some of the vibes of it, and you're wanting something that's a little bit, you know, different but similar, I do really recommend this book. There was a few moments in it that sort of made me think of Johnny and Shannon. I think the difference between the series and something I liked about this series as well was the fact that the characters in this book are a little bit older than the Boys of Tommen characters. So in this book, you know, they're going off to university. So in this book, it does sort of explain that she is in love with one of the other characters within the group, and that happens very, very early on in the book. And it's sort of like the dynamic of those two and what happens before they go off to university, and then it's her like meeting a new guy as well. So there is that idea of like, there is a love triangle, there is complications, and I'd say about, I think it was about page 320 onwards, I think the book just took me somewhere I just didn't expect. I think I expected it to go down a particular path and it didn't, and it was And I found myself like really invested in the narrative, and I really love the dynamic of the core group as well. So the main character, she has a twin brother and he's within the friendship group as well. So I like the dynamic of, you know, her relationship with her brother, her relationship with the guy that she's like loved for years. You know, there's the comedic relief character, and there's also like, you know, the female best friend. I felt like the dynamic of the group was really interesting. There are some really good like funny moments as well. I feel like the book constantly had me thinking like, where is this going? I don't feel like I could have written down specifically what was going to happen, and I really liked that in the book. It definitely left me wanting more. I know this is going to be a series, so this was the first book in the series, and I think there's going to be 5. So there's a new book, the second one's already out, the third one's going to be coming out in June of this year, I believe so. So each book's going to be about a different character in the main group, but I do kind of hope that there will be another book on Noah and Ari's story. I'd love to see what happens with them. Their story still feels a little bit unfinished to me, so I would love to see what happens with that and with them. I'm trying to keep this as spoiler free as possible. I think I will do a more in-depth review with spoilers all the time, but I'm trying to just be mindful in case you haven't read it. I do really recommend this book, you know, especially if you're into sports romances, college romances, found family, or even if you're just a fan of Boys of Tommen and you want to read something a bit similar. I do recommend Say You Sweat. And as I say, this was a 5-star read for me. So I'm going to give Promise Me Not 1.6 stars, which I know it sounds so crazy for me to say that this was a 5-star read and that this isn't. And it surprised even me. I think especially the first one, I think I became so obsessed with that so quickly, and I was so keen to read the second one. And even though it was to do with a different couple, I thought, oh, I'll still enjoy being in the world of the Boys of Avix. I just think from the start, I just didn't really respond well to this book. I don't feel like I felt a connection with the characters as much, which did really it did really surprise me, because in the first one I did really enjoy Mason's character, so I thought a book about him I would still really enjoy. But just for a bit of context, this book keeps time jumping, so it goes from like the current timeline and then it goes back to the past and sort of fills in some gaps for us. So we'll find out something in the present and we'll have some questions, and then the next chapter will sort of jump back to the past to sort of fill in those gaps and give us the context that we need as the reader. And I think for that reason, that's why I think I didn't really connect with it as much. I think because the whole way through the book, it was time jumping. I like things in chronological order. I like things in narrative. I feel like I become more immersed in the narrative. I become more invested in the characters. And with this one, because it kept sort of like going back, I think it gave me really like mixed feelings towards it. I found it sometimes a little bit confusing at times, or I found it hard to sympathize or empathize with the character because I didn't fully understand what they were going through until like the next chapter. The first one was, so Say You Swear was such a page turner for me. I was just so excited. I was savoring up every single word on the page, whereas with this book it was completely the opposite. It was less pages and I just kept thinking, oh, I need to get to the end of this. I just wanted to finish it. I do struggle to be a DNFer. If I decide not to finish a book, it's got to be extreme, because there's a little part of me, a little niggle, that hates to leave things unfinished. So even if a book, I just really don't respond well to it, I really try and like push through and try and think, right, we'll just get through this. And sometimes books can surprise you and you can think they're here, but then they end up being here. And with this book, but I felt like with this book, it was like the days were dragging on and I thought, okay, I need to finish this because there's other things I want to read and I just need to get it done. And I had to literally sit one evening and I was like, right, I'm going to sit here and I'm not going to move until I finish this book. And I think it was like 180 pages left of it at the time, and I powered through. So I got my Stanley Cup, I got a pillow, I got a blanket, I got the book, and I was like, right, I am finishing this today. This was a tough experience and this was a tough read for me. But as I say, the third book is coming out this year, so that was a reason why I did sort of say to myself, okay, if I can finish this one, at least I can give the third one the benefit of the doubt and try again, because the first one was so good. it's a real shame because, as I say, the first one was so good. So it was very much mixed feelings for me with the series so far. There's, you know, there's literally two ends of the scale. Obviously, you'll have your own opinion and you might think the complete opposite to me, and like that's absolutely fine. And I would be really interested to see what your opinions and thoughts are on Promise Me Not. But yeah, it was quite a drastic change for me to go from a 5-star to a 1.6. So next up is Taming 7, and I gave this book 4 stars. So I decided to read Taming 7 because the next book in the series was coming out. I wanted to read the most recent book in the series before the release, just to sort of get back into the world of Boys of Tommen again. If you're not familiar, within the Boys of Tommen series, the first 2 books follow Johnny and Shannon, the next 2 books follow Joey and Eva, and then this book here, Taming 7, follows Gibbsy and Claire. And I think with the first 2 books, it is like your entryway into Boys of Tommen, and I absolutely loved it. And then the following 2 books from that felt so different because it doesn't really take place in Tommen College. Joey and Eva sort of come into the group, so that's sort of their books are sort of their journey into Tommen and into like the found family, which, you know, it is really great reading their books, but it sort of felt so different from the first 2 books in the series. So reading Taming 7 was actually really nice. It really reminded me of the first 2 books in the series, which is really nice because you can sort of see where the characters are up to, what they're doing, and you get a little bit more insight into like the ongoing story. This book, I think it had the perfect balance of flashbacks and also a continuation of the story, which I really liked. Gibbsy is the like sort of like comedic relief character within the series, so in his book you get to understand him more, see why he's that way. And it also, when you go back to reread the series, there's a lot of things you learn in this book about him that, you know, when you reread the series, you go back and you think, oh, that's why he did these things, because, you know, I've got some understanding from this book. I really love the relationship between Gibbsy and Claire. I find their dynamic so interesting. I think they complement each other really well. I do think it becomes very dramatic towards the end of this book. I found this to be a really enjoyable read, and I think it's up there with one of my favourites in the series. So Taming 7, 4 stars, well done. And lastly is Releasing 10, which I am giving 3.8 stars. This book came out at the end of the month and I was trying to read it as quickly as possible so that I can do my reading wrap up. This is the most recent release in the Boys of Tommen series, and so this book is a backstory for Hughie and Lizzie and essentially starts in like 1991 up until 2004, I think. So it gives us the context we need to understand the characters, and we get to sort of understand Hughie and Lizzie's like relationship dynamic as well, because we don't really know much about that. You know, it's sort of alluded to throughout the books, but here we get a much clearer understanding of what they've been through together when they were a couple, and then when they were as friends, and also when they've been apart. And for me personally, the reason I've given 3.8 stars is because this book is a backstory book, and I'm not a big fan of backstories. I just think that's because I really like reading a book and just following on with the journey. I think I get so invested in characters and I'm just always thinking, what's next, what's next, what's next? And I'm all for flashback scenes. If there's a chapter and we're flashing back and we're going back, sort of like what's happened in Taming 7, I find that absolutely fine. I think that that is a nice way of us getting the context we need to understand the characters' motives and some of their characteristics as well. I think when the whole book is backstory, I think I really struggle with that. And I think it's just because I want to see what's next. And I think within the Boys of Tommen series, after Taming 7, there was a lot. If you've read it, you'll know that there's a lot of things that have happened towards the end, and I want to know what's happening next. And it's over 700 pages of backstory. Another thing to note about this book as well is it is a heavy read. There's some very dark subject matter within this book, so please make sure that you read the trigger warnings before actually, you know, starting this book. And that's really important, you know, just to protect your own mental health. So I did enjoy this book in the sense that I got to have my appreciation for Hughie and Lizzie throughout the book, and there are some really cute moments between the two throughout this book. And so I don't think I really knew that much about Hughie, and then once I've started reading this book, I've become more invested in his character, and it's the same with Lizzie. But I think it definitely sets me up for feeling really excited to get Hughie and Lizzie's second book. I'm excited to see what happens to their characters and what's going to happen next for them. It would be so lovely to see them get like a happy ending. So I definitely think I've had a bit of a mixed month in terms of the books that I've read. I say there's completely different ends of the scale. There's some 5 stars and there's some 1 stars. But at the same time, I feel very pleased with the month that I've had. I feel like I've had a good little mix. You know, there's been a YA romance in there, there's been a college romance, there's been a sports romance. Very romance heavy, actually. So I've seen lots of different reviews online about all of these books on Book Talk, on Goodreads, on BookTube, and you know, this is just my personal opinion and this is just what I think. I'm also really keen to know what you think about any of these books if you have read them, so please let me know in the comments. I'm also really excited for June and to get started on some new books as well. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and I'll see you next time, guys. Bye!